The Lost Teachings of Jesus, A Journey Through Time. In the dim glow of the flickering candlelight, Professor Daniel Whitmore traced his fingers over the brittle pages of an ancient manuscript. The air inside the Vatican's restricted archives was thick with the scent of old parchment and secrets buried for centuries. He had spent decades searching for a missing piece of history, fragments of wisdom that had supposedly been erased from the scriptures. Teachings of Jesus that could change the way humanity understood faith, love, and enlightenment. Legends spoke of a sacred text, hidden away by those who feared its power. Some claimed it contained insights into the nature of existence, the true purpose of life, and even the key to divine connection beyond the confines of organized religion. But was it real, or just another myth? Daniel's heart pounded as he carefully turned the page. His mentor, Father Gabriel, had whispered to him once about the Gospel of the Lost Light, a document believed to contain Jesus' most profound words, passed down in secret among early followers who dared to question authority. This knowledge, if revealed, could shake the foundations of modern belief systems. A distant thunder rumbled outside, as if nature itself anticipated the revelation to come. As Daniel's eyes scanned the page, he felt something stir within him, a strange sensation, as if he were not alone in the dimly lit chamber. The words on the manuscript were faded, yet the message they carried was timeless. What if the world had misunderstood Jesus all along? The hidden truths unveiled. Daniel Whitmore had always believed that history never told the full truth. A professor of theology with a particular fascination for ancient texts, he had spent decades searching for traces of the missing years of Jesus Christ, those undocumented periods that the Bible remains silent about. But he had never imagined he would find himself standing here, within the cold stone walls of the Vatican's secret archives, holding a manuscript that could change everything. The flickering candlelight cast long shadows on the yellowed parchment, illuminating faded ink markings in delicate Aramaic script. Daniel ran his fingers gently over the ancient words, heart pounding as he deciphered their meaning. When I left my land, I found great teachers from the east. They showed me that the kingdom of heaven is not above nor below, but within every man who seeks it. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. His long-standing suspicions were taking shape in front of his very eyes. Could it be that Jesus had traveled to the east, learning from sages of Buddhism, Hinduism, and other spiritual traditions before returning to his homeland to teach? And if that were true, why had these records vanished from biblical history? Who had erased them? He turned the fragile pages carefully. Reading further, the text spoke of a select group of disciples, individuals who had been entrusted with deeper, more mystical knowledge than what was shared publicly. My closest disciples. Remember, faith is not in the written word, but in the light within. Salvation does not come from temples of stone, but from the awakening of one's soul. A shiver ran down Daniel's spine. If these words were made public, they could shake the very foundation of organized religion. They implied that Jesus had not merely preached about faith in God, but had also emphasized the direct connection between the divine and each individual, a concept that could threaten religious institutions that sought to hold power over the faithful. A sudden noise echoed in the corridor outside. Daniel stiffened, instinctively pulling his cloak over the manuscript. Someone was watching him. There was a knock at the door, soft but urgent. Daniel hesitated before opening it, finding himself face to face with a young man dressed in a monk's robe. His eyes held a nervous intensity. Professor Whitmore, the monk whispered, "You are not safe here." Daniel narrowed his eyes. "Who are you?" The monk glanced down the hallway before pressing a small, folded piece of parchment into Daniel's palm. "Leave immediately," he murmured. "There are those who do not want this truth to be known." Daniel watched as the young man disappeared into the shadows. He unfolded the paper carefully. "Find the keeper of the light in Jerusalem. They hold the next key." The journey to Jerusalem. The next 24 hours passed in a blur. Daniel managed to smuggle the fragile manuscript out of the Vatican, hiding it between the pages of an old leather-bound volume. He knew the risks, his academic career, his reputation, even his safety, but something deep inside told him this was bigger than himself. Arriving in Jerusalem, Daniel wasted no time. He followed the cryptic message, tracing mentions of the Keeper of the Light through obscure religious texts, old records, and whispered legends passed down through generations. One name kept resurfacing, Father Elijah Barak. a reclusive mystic who had lived in the outskirts of Jerusalem for over 40 years. Rumors surrounded him. Some called him a heretic, others a prophet, but one thing was certain: if anyone held the answers Daniel sought, it was him. Daniel found the old priest in a small stone monastery, hidden away from the chaos of the city. The air inside was thick with incense, and candlelight flickered against walls lined with ancient scrolls. "You have come a long way," Father Elijah said before Daniel could even introduce himself. His voice was deep, resonant, as if carrying the weight of centuries. "You know why I am here," Daniel replied, carefully placing the manuscript on the wooden table between them. The old priest nodded. "You seek the lost teachings, the truths that were hidden, not by accident, but by design." Daniel leaned forward. "Why were they erased?" Father Elijah sighed. "Because they threatened the foundation of control. Imagine if people knew they did not need intermediaries to reach God. That heaven was not a distant paradise but a state of enlightenment within." Daniel felt his pulse quicken. Then what was Jesus' real message? The priest lifted the manuscript, tracing the ancient lines of text with a reverent touch. He taught that divinity is within every human being, that love, wisdom, and inner awakening were the true paths to salvation. Not rituals, not institutions, just the awakening of the soul. A long silence filled the room. Daniel had always suspected this, but hearing it spoken aloud gave it a new weight, a profound realization that sent chills through him. "But if that's true," he said slowly, "then everything we have been taught, the way faith has been structured for centuries." The priest nodded gravely. "Yes, it changes everything." Suddenly, a sharp noise broke the silence, a loud knock at the monastery door, followed by hurried voices outside. "They've found you," Father Elijah whispered. Daniel's heart pounded. "Who?" "The ones who have spent centuries keeping this hidden." Before he could react, the priest pressed a small, leather-bound book into Daniel's hands. "Go," he urged. "Take this and never stop searching." Daniel hesitated for only a moment before slipping the book into his satchel. As he turned to escape through the back entrance, a single thought consumed his mind. The truth had been hidden for centuries, but now, there was no turning back. Daniel barely had time to register what was happening before he was thrust into a desperate escape. As he slipped through the back entrance of the monastery, his heart pounded with the knowledge that he was being hunted, not for wealth, not for power, but for the truth itself. Outside, the narrow alleyways of Jerusalem's old city stretched before him like a labyrinth. The night air was cool against his skin, but the tension in his chest burned hot. He clutched the leather-bound book Father Elijah had given him, sensing that whatever was inside could be the missing key to understanding everything. Behind him, muffled voices and hurried footsteps echoed off the stone walls. The people hunting him were not ordinary thieves or opportunists, they were organized, determined, and willing to go to any length to protect the secret he had uncovered. Daniel moved quickly, taking random turns through the alleyways, slipping into shadows, blending with the sparse crowds still wandering the streets. He had spent years studying the ancient texts of Christianity, but never had he imagined he would become a fugitive for seeking the truth. After what felt like an eternity, he found shelter in a small, abandoned chapel on the outskirts of the city. The wooden doors creaked as he pushed them open, revealing dust-covered pews and a cracked altar, long forgotten by the world. He took a deep breath, sank to the ground, and opened the book. Inside, the pages were filled with symbols and writings in multiple languages: Aramaic, Hebrew, Greek, but one section caught his eye, written in careful Latin script: "The Gospel of the Light, the true teachings of the Master." His hands trembled as he turned the pages. The text was unlike anything he had ever read before. It spoke of a time when Jesus had journeyed beyond the borders of Judea, seeking wisdom from the sages of the East. He had learned meditation from Hindu mystics, compassion from Buddhist monks, and the art of healing from ancient Egyptian priests. But most striking of all was a passage that seemed to challenge everything Daniel had been taught. "The kingdom of God is not built of gold and stone, nor can it be ruled by men. It is within you, waiting to be found. No priest, no temple, no scripture can grant you salvation, only the awakening of your own soul." Daniel let out a slow, shaky breath. If these words were true, it meant that faith had been twisted, repackaged, and controlled for centuries. Religion had not been built to free people. It had been built to contain them. A noise outside shattered his thoughts. He froze, listening. The footsteps were slow and deliberate. Someone had found him. Betrayal and revelation. The wooden door creaked open, and a shadow stretched across the dusty floor. Daniel's pulse pounded in his ears as a familiar voice spoke. "You should not have come here." He looked up in shock. Standing before him, wrapped in a dark cloak, was the young monk who had warned him back at the Vatican. "You," Daniel whispered, "you told me to come here. You led me to the keeper of the light." The monk stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "Yes, and I have been watching you ever since." Daniel slowly rose to his feet, keeping his grip firm on the book. "Who are you?" For a long moment, the monk was silent. Then, he pulled back his hood, revealing piercing blue eyes and sharp features. "My name is Elias," he said, "and I am part of an ancient order, one that has protected these secrets for centuries." Daniel's mind raced. "Then why are you here now? To help me?" Elias shook his head. "To stop you." A chill ran down Daniel's spine. "You don't understand. The world needs to know the truth. These teachings are dangerous." Elias interrupted. "You think faith is about enlightenment? That people want to find God within themselves? No, they want certainty, structure, someone to tell them what is right and wrong." Daniel clenched his jaw. "That's exactly why this truth must be revealed. Because people deserve the freedom to choose their own path." Elias studied him for a long moment. Then, he sighed. "You remind me of another man who once tried to reveal this truth," he said quietly, "a man who was crucified for it." Daniel's breath caught. "You're saying Jesus was killed, not just for claiming to be the Son of God, but for what he truly believed?" Elias nodded. "His greatest crime was not blasphemy, it was rebellion. He taught that the divine belonged to all, not just the priests, the kings, or the wealthy, and that made him a threat." Daniel felt a weight settle over him. He had spent his entire life studying theology, but now, standing here, he realized he had only ever known a fraction of the truth. He looked down at the book in his hands. Then why preserve these teachings at all, if they can never be shared? Elias hesitated. "Because one day, the world may be ready, but not today." Daniel felt his fingers tighten around the book. "What if I refuse to stay silent?" Elias's expression darkened. "Then you will suffer the same fate as all those before you." A long silence stretched between them. Daniel knew he had a choice. He could walk away now, return to his academic life, and let the world remain blind to what he had discovered. Or he could risk everything to share the truth, even if it meant facing the same dangers that had silenced so many before him. He thought of Jesus, standing before the powerful leaders of his time, knowing his message would cost him his life. He thought of Father Elijah, risking everything to pass on the knowledge. And then, he thought of the millions of people who had spent their lives searching for meaning, trapped in a system that had hidden the very truth they sought. The choice was clear. "I will not be silent," Daniel said. Elias studied him, then sighed. "I feared you would say that." From beneath his robe, he pulled out a small parchment and placed it on the altar. "If you are truly committed to this path," he said, "go to the ruins of Qumran. There, you will find the final piece of the puzzle." Daniel hesitated, searching Elias's face for any sign of deception, but the monk merely turned and walked away, disappearing into the night. Daniel looked down at the parchment. Written in delicate ink were the words, "Seek the watchers, they have been waiting for you." The sun was just beginning to rise over the arid hills of Qumran when Daniel finally arrived. His body ached from the long journey, but his mind was sharper than ever. The words on Elias's parchment had burned into his thoughts. "Seek the watchers, they have been waiting for you." The ruins stretched before him, an expanse of crumbling stone structures, their edges softened by time and desert winds. Somewhere beneath this ancient landscape lay the truth that had been buried for centuries. Daniel pulled his coat tightly around him and stepped forward. At first, the sight seemed abandoned, but as he navigated the worn pathways, he noticed subtle signs of movement, a glimmer of fabric disappearing around a corner, the faint sound of footsteps echoing through the stone corridors. He wasn't alone. Then, at the base of a rocky outcrop, he saw them. A small group of figures stood in a semicircle, their robes rippling in the wind. They were older, their faces lined with the weight of knowledge. Their eyes, however, burned with intensity. One of them stepped forward, a woman with silver hair and a gaze that seemed to pierce through him. "You have come far," she said, her voice carrying a quiet strength. "And you seek the truth." Daniel nodded, feeling the weight of the book still secured in his bag. "I was told to find you. To find the watchers." The woman smiled faintly. "Then you have already begun to understand." She gestured for him to follow, leading him into a concealed cavern beneath the ruins. Inside, torches flickered against the walls, illuminating rows of ancient scrolls and tablets. The air was thick with the scent of parchment and time itself. Daniel's breath caught. This is the missing history, isn't it?" The woman nodded. "These are the records of those who walked with Jesus, who knew him not as a distant God, but as a man, a teacher, a revolutionary." She placed a hand on an unmarked chest and slowly lifted the lid. Inside, wrapped in cloth, was a single scroll. "This," she said, "is the final testimony." Daniel reached for it, his fingers trembling, as he unrolled the fragile parchment. His eyes scanned the words written by an unknown hand. The Master spoke of the light within all men. He taught not of power, nor of conquest, but of unity. Yet they feared him, for he gave the people what no kingdom could, the knowledge that they were already free. Daniel swallowed hard. This was it, the message that had been buried beneath centuries of doctrine. Stripped from history, hidden from the world, the woman's voice was soft. "Now you must decide. Do you return to the world and share what you have found, knowing that you will be hunted? Or do you let it remain hidden, protected, as it has been for centuries?" Daniel closed his eyes. He thought of the Vatican, of the monastery, of Elias and the sacrifices so many had made. But most of all, he thought of the millions of souls searching for meaning, trapped in a system designed to control rather than enlighten. He took a deep breath and looked up. "I will share it," he said, "no matter the cost." The woman studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Then may the light be with you." As Daniel stepped back into the morning sun, he knew his journey was just beginning. And so was the revolution.